Welcome to Protecting Your Assets, the show about protecting people, property, and most importantly, protecting your ass. I'm your host, Lucky Luciano, and I'd like you to join me for a fast-paced and often fiery discussion about security issues with my co-host, Brian the Angry Man Claman. Whether we're piercing the veil of security, talking your duty of care, or raving about the latest technology, we'll share our thoughts on the issues, the trends that are impacting security today and into the future. So grab a coffee and join us for our latest podcast every second Monday. And don't forget to like and follow us on our sponsor's website, brianclaman.com. And now let's talk about protecting your assets. Hello and welcome to Protecting Your Assets. I'm your host, Lucky Luciano Cedrone, and with me is Brian the Angry Man Claman. It has been a while since we last came to you, but we are now into episode 31. We're going to be talking about consultants and how to pick a good one. Let's get into today's episode. I'm going to turn it over to my wingman, Brian, for his customary rant about what's keeping him up at night. He's had a few weeks to build up, I guess, some anger.
And, hello, everyone. First of all, I do want to apologize for my friend Luciano, who again has misspoken. The reason we have not been on for several weeks now has been because we were sanctioned by the CRTC for Luciano's outlandish behavior a few episodes ago. So we've been suspended from the airwaves, and we're back today. Actually, that's not true. Luciano's right. We've just been really busy and sort of refocusing how we're going to deliver these podcasts. So we're back on a regular routine. What keeps me up at night, it's not COVID. There's really two things I want to talk about today. Political doublespeak and virtual signaling. And, Wikipedia, which is my go-to source, says that doublespeak is language that deliberately obscures, disguises, distorts, or reverses the meaning of words. Doublespeak may take the form of euphemisms, downsizing for layoffs, servicing the target for a bombing, neutralizing for an assassination, in which case it is primarily meant to make the truth sound more plausible. Is that something that as Canadians we've heard from our politicians recently? It's just amazing the amount of speak that come out of these guys across all parties. And now the next part of the rant, and I'm going to get into some examples, is virtue signaling. And virtual signaling may be thought as a form of moral grandstanding, in which a viewpoint or answer is calculated to look good, thereby making the object or speaker or prime minister, oops, did I say that, appear virtuous to others rather than being chosen because of its strict honesty. So like some examples of both these things are virtue signaling and doublespeak. One is that comes to mind is the unmarked grave situation with the Indigenous communities. Yeah. What have we done, okay? What have we done in the third mandate of this government? We've had the flags at half staff for the last 5 months, and now everything is fine. We still have unsafe drinking water at Aboriginal in Aboriginal communities in the north. Okay, I don't know when that's going to be fixed. Just like Donald Trump kept blaming Obama for all the ills of the U.S., this government seems to blame Stephen Harper for all the ills, even though they're on their third mandate. We had the residential schools. The Canadian government, under Mr. Trudeau, is appealing the decision of the Canadian Federal Court that upheld a landmark Canadian Human Rights Tribunal ruling on Indigenous child welfare compensation. The court basically said to our leaders that are very happy to lower the flags into virtue signaling, this is the compensation you have to give the victims and the survivors and their families for what you did. But it's really easy to lower a flag, but what does their government do? They appeal it. They're appealing it, and they're entering into negotiations, okay, with the different communities to see if they can come up for some sort of a ruling. The Human Rights Tribunal that these virtue signaling, politically double-speaking politicians believe is so core to what we do as Canadians rules on against the government, and all of a sudden they're no longer viable, and they go to the federal court. And even the federal court saying, whoa, it was a valid ruling. Drinking water fiasco, as I said, and it's we're just off Remembrance Day. Homelessness and underserved veterans. I cannot believe how we treat our veterans in this country. The freedoms we enjoy, the life we live, is because of them. And I had something else, but you know what? I'm not going to say it right now because I don't want to take too much time from our main topic.
Oh my God, yes. All right. Well, I'm going to add one thing to your Remembrance Day thing. I'll tell you, my son works in an office where one of the coworkers is one of these, well, let's call him, lefty, tree hugging
A
persona.
woke, a woke person. It's like a
who
Wookiee.
refused to stand up for a minute of silence at the workplace when everyone else was doing it, and trying to slough it off as a principle of saying that, well, don't agree with those men killing other men, and it sort of makes your head shake because those men are the reason why she can act the way she acts today. It's ridiculous that we've lost the perspective on what they did, what they sacrificed
You
for.
know, I said that we're going to move on to the topic. You just now ignited a firestorm in me.
Oh,
Uh,
Jesus.
no. But I just got to say this. Okay, she doesn't agree with the killing. They were killing Taliban people that were raping and cutting the heads off of women.
I know.
They served in World War II to liberate 6 million, or too late for 6 million Jews. What amazes me with some people, and maybe some younger people, we don't learn history anymore.
Yeah.
They don't understand the freedom is free. What these men and women did, our veterans have done, whether they served overseas in a combat zone or just served in Canada, it's more, a million times, than what people like this have done. They've done nothing to contribute to the society other than to say, I'm not taking a vaccination because you're taking away my freedom. That is just disgusting.
Yeah, it is disgusting. It's an indication of where we've come. Entitlement, complacency, whatever you want to call it. These are people who had to go without food, without water, without power, without losing family, and they never complained, right? And if they complained, they shut their mouth, they put their head down, and they went to war. They went to do what had to be done. And I don't
That's
think that
right.
we're able to do that anymore. The other piece that I wanted to touch on quickly was on my end, what I've seen really that's just another indication of how messed up this world is getting. I don't know if you've been following that Rittenhouse trial
Oh yeah.
in the U.S. Watching both sides. I mean, regardless of whether or not you think he's guilty, just the arguments that are being made seem so far out of touch with what's going on the video. It's right there in front of you that these guys were all, I think, to a degree, complicit in creating the situation and went down there with that intention. I don't care if, like I said, Rittenhouse was down there for a reason, but to pretend that those other three guys were there to sing "Kumbaya" and hold hands is just absurd. So that to me was disturbing. And I'll tell you, you're gonna find this probably funny because I don't usually talk about this type of stuff, but I was bored the other night, so we watched the documentary on Britney Spears. So,
Oh
and
my God, you have a fever?
yeah, no kidding. And I thought the same thing, right? I really could care less about superstars and their issues. I think a lot of times they just want to be heard. But I'll tell you, it was an eye opener to understand what a conservatory really is and like the power that her father had over her. He could dictate the meds that she took. She didn't have a choice in that kind of stuff. And it was like scary to think that a judge allowed that crap, despite the fact that she allegedly had a lawyer appointed to protect her. But as you watch the documentary, you see that that lawyer was actually paid by the conservatory. So there's no interest there for him to defend her, to look out for her best interest. And so they were all just eating at the trough, right? It's disgusting. It really is.
It is. It's very disappointing, especially the Britney Spears example, because I always, and I realize this is the United States, and perhaps I hope Canada is different, but I always believe that your rights would be protected by the courts. Yeah. And I never really understood that conservatorship in that they didn't say, like in Canada, as a policeman, if you attend a call where someone's emotionally disturbed and they're a threat to themselves or to others, you can apprehend them and compel them to go to a hospital for assessment. So I understand that because that's an urgent, imminent threat. Britney Spears was age majority. No one ever said she was mentally incompetent. I don't really understand what happened there. And I just want to say one more thing about Rittenhouse. That's what happens when you go to a demonstration where there's a possibility of upheaval, wearing a long gun that's high caliber. Like, what do you think is going to happen? Like, I'm just amazed some of the scenes out of the U.S. that you have these people open carrying small arms and weapons that are high capacity, weapons of war, you might say.
Yeah. And
And
then
then
scratch their heads when things go wrong.
how did this happen?
How did it
Oh, I
happen?
know that if it was Canada and you were on the opposing side, I think the worst that could have happened was a black eye, not a
Yeah.
bullet hole, and you'd probably be in cuffs 13 seconds later. It's
Yeah.
hard for the police, I would think, in the States when everyone's got a weapon and there's friendlies and not friendlies. It's like even the term friendlies and not friendlies. It's like you're in Afghanistan, you're in
Yeah.
Vietnam, you're in, man, oh man, what a world.
It's crazy. All right, so we got that out of our system. Let's move on to the topic of the day, because we do want to keep these a little shorter than the hour that we've done in the past. And today we're going to talk about consulting. It's something that obviously we've done, and we continue to do, and something that I think is needed in our society. And we'll talk about that certainly with when you think about some of the clients that we've dealt with, and some of the things they've put forward or tried to do with their own in-house residents, so-called experts in security. It is eye-opening to see and hear some of the things that go on in the space. So with that, we thought it would be important to talk about what a good consultant should do, or what you should look for in a good consultant. And with that, let's start it off with, what do you think is a key attribute, Brian, that people should consider when they're shopping around?
Well, I think you and I work for large companies when we're in the real estate world, and I suspect, or I would liken our position was sort of like the in-house consultant. The reality is most companies don't have anyone with the expertise that they need to help them navigate the waters as it relates to security, protection of asset and the people. And that's really what I do. That's what you do. We're sort of a gun for hire, if you will.
Yep.
But there's a lot of guns for hire out there. And how do you know you're getting the right guy? What are the things that you should be looking for? My experience has been that people just contact you, hit or miss, either through a referral or they saw your website, and then they'll sign a contract in many cases. And God bless them for doing that. But I will tell you that most of the engagements we've done over the last 3 years, no one has really checked us out. No one has really asked us about our experience or our certifications or competencies. No one has even asked, do you have insurance? Think about that for a second. When we do a public tender, they're really good at asking for your insurance and you have WSIB. But think about it. You're retained as a consultant because someone has a security issue they're concerned about, and they want to make sure that they're doing their duty of care by keeping people and assets safe, okay? And they're going to rely on you, and based on what the consultant tells them, they're going to make some business decisions and then call it a day. And let's say the consultant gave you the wrong information. It was obvious that the consultant was the wrong person for the job, but you didn't do any due diligence. And then you get sued because someone gets beaten up in a parking lot, or property gets stolen that shouldn't have been stolen. And you get sued for gross negligence because it should never have come to the situation it came to, okay? And you say, no worries, I'm going to get sued and I'm going to sue the consultant and warranty, which is the way things get done. But then you find out the consultant has no insurance because you never checked to see if he has insurance, or he's underinsured. And then you say, okay, I'm going to sue the guy personally, okay? But then you find out he lives in his mother's basement and he has no assets. I mean, these are the things you need to do before you engage a consultant. You have to clearly define what it is you want the consultant to do, and then you have to take the time, almost RFI it, to do your due diligence to make sure the consultant has the skill, expertise, and the infrastructure with insurance, back office to do it, and then you engage them.
Yeah, I think all of that, to encapsulate it, would be, I think, knowledgeable, right? On two levels. The person looking for the consultant needs to figure out, they have to have the knowledge that they're picking the right consultant, but that consultant has to have the credentials to be able to speak to whatever issue is that you're being hired for. And a good example I have that illustrates that, I would say, years ago we had a guy who was on TV friggin' almost every day. Every time there was an issue, you'd see this person pop up on TV, and right underneath it, right, expert, security expert, in big bold letters. And I had the privilege of taking a course once with one of the editors for Global News. And at the coffee break, I asked her, I said, you got these people on your TV program and you say that they're experts, but I can tell you that that specific person, he may call himself an expert, but if you look at the credentials, they don't have it. They don't have the credentials, they don't have the experience, and yet you're telling people that they're a security expert on national TV. Don't you have a problem with that? And her response was basically, we put it up there as long as they don't agree, as long as they don't have issues with it, it goes up there. And that to me is sort of a fundamental example of what's wrong with most businesses, not just ours as security and consulting, but in general, people just read it or tweet it, and that's it. It's gospel. They don't do that extra effort to figure out, is it real? Are they who they say they are, and do they have what I need out of them? In a credible fashion.
Well, it's interesting you use the term experts, because I agree with you. There's very few experts. In fact, if you recall, we did a podcast, several podcasts back, where our guest is Phil Gursky, a senior analyst with CSIS, retired senior analyst with CSIS, who I would suggest is probably one of the foremost terrorism experts, certainly in Canada, if not in the Western world. And Phil was I think you or I may have called him an expert. And he corrected us.
Yes.
And he said, I'm not an expert. He says, I'm knowledgeable. I spent the last 30 years in this domain, but I'm not an expert. We use that term too loosely. And, when I look at our competitors out there, when I talk with people, when I talk with customers, clients, and they say, well, you guys are experts in such and such. And I say, well, we have expertise in this area of security. We have experience in this area of security. When you say expert, I think of maybe court certified expert. I mean, there's a high bar to meet to be court certified. Yeah. And it's not forever. You're court certified for the one issue at hand. The reality is most consultants you see are not experts. They're very skilled practitioners. Yeah. Because an expert typically is a point in time. You can be a medical doctor and you could be the best gynecologist in the world, but that doesn't mean you're an expert in brain surgery. So that's a problem. And that's what I would tell prospective users of consulting services is there's certain things that we look out for, and look out for people that call themselves experts. And that's not to say that they're not, but when you hear that term, you should have some follow-up questions. Why do you consider yourself an expert? What makes you an expert over the other person? Have you been in court and certified by a court as being an expert? Because they may have been. And in that case, they can call themselves an expert, for the thing they have expertise in. But you know what? I would never say I'm an expert. I'm a 40-plus year practitioner. I'm a security generalist. My focus has been on emergency management, on program management development, policy development, okay? I am not an expert. I'm just really, really good, and one of the better guys that you're going to find. So I think people got to be careful of what
they call
what the salesman is selling.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously knowledge, expertise is a key component. You want to know that you're hiring somebody that can do the job. Let's move on to a couple of the other items that I want to touch on that I think are important to consultants selection. And you may disagree, but probably not, because I'm usually right. And if you want to add something, you're welcome to do that. But I think
hold on. You may be right, but don't forget that I'm an expert.
I think it's important for a consultant to be a good people person. And what I mean by that is they have to be good listeners, not necessarily talking more than they do listening, right? Really understand what their clients' needs are. And they have to be relationship builders, right? They can't be just guys who take the order, they disappear, and they show up. As a consultant, you're out there all the time working relationships, leveraging connections to find out information. You need to find out other information as you get different types of projects. You might have to talk to the police. You might have to talk to the school board. You might have to talk to the plumber, whatever it is that you're dealing with. And so a capacity to be able to interact with people in a comfortable fashion and listen to what they're saying and understand that, I think is an important aspect of the consultancy role. Would you agree?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, and I'm starting to feel a bit nauseous because I'm agreeing with you too much. But I couldn't agree with you more because when in my last job, when I worked for that big real estate company, I didn't have to listen as much, and let me before I come across being pompous, I didn't have to listen that much within the organization because I was part of the organization. I understood the culture, I understood the pain points. But when you hire a consultant, it's like renting a car. It's for a point in time. And when Hertz gives you that car, they don't know how you're going to drive the car. They don't have that knowledge. They don't know how you're going to drive it when you have it, what your experience has been. Even they don't even know what the car's going to look like when they get it back. Is it dirty, smashed, or whatever? Well, I think consultants have to be good listeners. I think they have to be good. They have to ask good probative questions so they get a good understanding of the environment they're going into. But then they have to listen.
Yeah.
And almost like a good police detective who does interrogations, most of the talking has to come from the interviewer.
Yeah.
And it's the consultant's job to put something out there and extrapolate the information from the client. And often you'll see that consultants don't do that or are incapable of doing that.
Yeah. And that leads me to my next piece of that same equation, because you have to listen, absolutely understand what their needs are. But I think even more importantly is to have the rapport or a good enough relationship connection with the client to be able to report it back to them in a truthful and honest and open manner, which I think a lot of times this is where you see a lot of consultants get into arguments while you give them what they want. I don't believe that. I think our role as consultants is to tell them what they should have. And if they can't afford it, that's a different discussion. Or if they don't want to do it, it's a different discussion. But I think as experts, go back to that whole thing. If I'm the expert and I'm telling you you need A, even though you might not like to hear it, it's my responsibility to say it is A that you need to solve your problem. Now we can work on a solution B, but that is my role, is to tell you how to best meet your needs.
A great point, Luke. I think the old adage, the customer is always right. Well, certainly not in consulting. And I would say that if the customer knew what they needed, they wouldn't need to retain the customer. And I think it really comes down to sophistication, like business sophistication, business majority. You've got to be able to look a client in the eye and tell them, respect, you're wrong. And essentially, what you have to say without being rude is you don't know what you're talking about. And this is why it's wrong. And these are the consequences, because if you're just a yes man, and too many of us are, because, you don't want to bite off the head of the person that's paying you. You don't want to annoy them because you want to get invited back on another mandate. But then you're not really bringing the value. Our job, and you alluded to it, is to tell the client what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. And if the client decides not to listen and proceed contrary to your guidance anyways, as long as it's not illegal or immoral, I'm going to try and make it happen for the client. But I'm going to manage the expectation to say, listen, I wouldn't go this way, and these are my concerns. We understand that you do want to go this way, and as long as you understand the risks inherent with your decision, we're good to go. But not to say that we're going to sink you if this is wrong. I would never do that. There's a confidentiality agreement with clients and everything like that. I'm not going to point at them and say, I told you so. I would never do that. But the real value is getting the right consultant that has the knowledge base and the experience that can give you that information you need so you can make an informed decision. And, there are times where the decision is informed, but it's not what the consultant says because there's other factors of play, and that's fair. That's the way the world works also.
Yeah, absolutely. Going on to my next point, and I think this one might catch you a little off guard, but I think it's important because I think you've done a lot of work in this area, or you've tried to create a brand that really reflects what your service levels or what you expect them to be, right? And what I mean by that is, you have to portray a certain image, and as a client, you want a consultant that portrays a certain image, whatever that is. You may be an Apple with a more loosey-goosey type of a work environment versus a bank, which wants you more, shirt and tie, suit type of an environment. And you have to make sure that your consultant matches what your expectation, what your brand is going to be, so that they can project that out there as well. Because they're going to be your conduit to stakeholders that are involved with that process. And if you're not jiving with what the client is trying to achieve, then it sends mixed signals. And in a really bad case, it could work against you, right? Like if you're a really professional outfit like a law firm, and you show up dressed in khakis and a t-shirt, it's probably not going to be the image that they want projected, and they're not going to be happy with your service. So you really got to work on a brand, developing your image, and making sure that when the clients that you're approaching match the brand that you want to put out there.
Yeah, I think brand is important. It's a differentiator. It's also your business card, if you will. And what we try and do in our business is the name of the firm, which happens to be my name, I have to pick a name, is the brand. And everyone that's part of the firm delivers services at a certain level consistent with the brand. And over time, the hope is that people say, oh, when I hear Brian Claman Associates, they are experts in this area, or they're specialists in this area, and this is the quality of work they do. I also hope they'll say, hey, they're not the guys I'm going to call if I need some cyber penetration testing, or they're not the guys I'm going to call if I'm doing some surveillance and undercover work, okay? Because that's not what a brand is. So I think brand sort of defines you. A problem with this industry, a problem with the industry as a whole, and some consultants is that it's a cutthroat business, and people don't want to walk away from a job. And you and I, just before we went on camera, talked about a situation you just experienced in which we don't want to manage expectations, because that's going to annoy the client. So we basically tell them anything they want to hear and try and figure out afterwards. And part of your due diligence is really to ask your consultant that you're considering, what projects have you done? Where have you disagreed with the client? How have you handled that? What are your success stories? What are your failures? And again, it goes back to, honestly, I would say probably 80% of the time that I've been doing this for the last 3 years, I get hired without any interview. There is no due diligence process. Again, I'm not complaining because I feed my family, but it just sort of surprises me. I wouldn't buy a pair of shoes without trying it on. Yet someone will engage a consultant on a $20,000 or $100,000 mandate. They haven't really tried on the shoes.
Yeah, you'd think they'd want to spend that kind of money too.
Yeah.
And I think the last point that I have in terms of what I think is important, because we've talked about you need the expertise. You want them to be good listeners. You want them to be good in relationships. But I think the other piece of it is having good business etiquette, diplomatic skills, tact. I think of the current project that we're both working on with one of the banks. We don't need to say who it is, but we're working with a consultant on that who's managing all the stakeholders. And I got to say, when you look at that person, that is exactly what I'm referring to when I talk about etiquette. There could be a firestorm of angry eagles and finger pointing going on around him in the room, but he's always got calm, control, very positive vibes, keeps people informed. Like, he does all the little things that make everything seem to move much more smoother, efficiently, and keeps everybody happy, right? Like, you don't need unnecessary stress when you're dealing with a major project like that one is.
Yeah, no, I agree. Our project manager, the lead in that particular project, is a really skilled people person, very even keel. I mean, with COVID, and we're not seeing clients face to face, at least not the way we used to. So we all tend to be a little bit sloppy. I notice wearing the T-shirt there, Mr. Cedrone.
I know.
as I have. But he's always dressed the part. He's always calm. I'm sort of an emotional guy, and I get excited, and I need you and others to walk me off the ledge sometimes. But he's always even keel, and I need that, and that's what your consultant needs to be, and realize that when you're engaging a consultant, often you're engaging a team, and that comes to the brand, and the culture of the organization, and that was a great example actually that you just gave. I almost wish we can give kudos to the person, but we can't.
Well, maybe one day we'll let them hear the episode and tell them what we're talking about.
yeah, exactly.
So that, I think that's for me, that's a pretty good sort of picture of what I would expect a consultant to do for me, and what I would hope they would do for me, that they'd guide me in the right direction with based on their experience, their knowledge, their expertise. And then tell me when I'm wrong. I mean, I need to be told when I'm wrong. That's what I've hired you for, to tell me what I need to know. And so when you just tell me what I want to hear, you're not doing yourself any services, because at some point something's going to go off the rails and you're going to say, well, why didn't you tell me? Well, I didn't, you didn't ask, or I didn't think you'd like it. That's not an argument, and that's not our role. We need to help our clients succeed. And so honest, open communication is part of that equation. Is there anything else you think that we haven't touched on that should be discussed?
Yeah, I'd like to just talk about pricing a little bit.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
pricing is a
and
good one.
and it's important because when there's multiple proposals and you're looking at the price, just understand what goes into the price. Okay, less is not always better. And years ago, when I was new in my career, I was working with Pure Data Courier. I was in charge of security and cargo loss for Eastern Canada, Quebec and Maritime. And one of my roles was litigation support. And when there'd be a cargo claim for a loss of a courier package, would come into my group. We would work with, we try and settle the claim. If the person wasn't happy and ended up suing us, then I would liaise with the legal folks that were going to handle litigation. And we were using outside counsel, and what amazed me was that I noticed in short order the defense for every claim that we got, litigation claim we got, was almost the same. They just changed the date and the location and the value, but the defense, the pleading, the 10 pages that was filed with the court was the same. And back in the day, I was getting these bills for each one of like $3,500, which might be $10,000 or $15,000 today. And literally, the lawyer became my friend, and I'd be in his office, and it was Corel Word Perfect word processors.
Oh my God.
Before computers. And he would press a button, and he'd spit it out, and he'd say, "Here's your defense, $3,500, please, or $10,000 today, or 15." And I said, "Marty, this is crazy." I said, "You're charging me this, and it just took you literally 30 seconds." And he says, "No, Brian, it took me a lot longer. It took me 20 years. I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He says, "You're getting the benefit of 20 years of experience, okay?
Yeah.
If you want a lawyer that's going to charge you a lot less, go to Peter. He graduated 6 months ago, and that's what you're going to pay for." So it's the same thing with a consultant. I try to explain to customers when they say, "How come this is so expensive?" And I don't want to scare away future business. I mean, we do engagements that are $2,000 or $3,000, but people have to understand that if you're getting someone that's been in the business for 30, 40 years, and our organization has combined experience of, 100 and some odd years, almost 200 years, when you look at all the associates and the expertise, that's what you're paying for. And the fact that I can do it in a half an hour when another guy may have to do it in 2 hours doesn't mean that I'm gouging you, and it doesn't mean should I be penalized. I mean, there's a lot that went into it. So there's a lot to go into pricing. And I think if you trust and are comfortable with the consultant you engage, okay, a good consultant is not going to gouge you. It's not in his or her interest. They're going to find where economies of scale are possible, and they're going to propose a price. Work with you, and they're going to propose a price which is reflective of what they believe they're bringing to you. Listen, if I'm charging a lot of money and you start seeing the deliverables are substandard, you're going to know soon enough that you made a mistake, and you're going to terminate the relationship. Conversely, if someone's charging you $50 an hour and they put in 3 hours, okay, what are you getting for that 3 hours of work?
Yeah.
So I think
Oh, okay. Well, no, it's a good point. And yeah, pricing is something that's obviously very important at the end of the day. But I think it's a factor of all the things we talked about. When you're a professional, when you've got the credentials, when you've got the skills that we talked about, the confidence to speak openly and with trust with your client, that all comes with time. And so when you get a kid, and there's a lot of them in our industry that posted on LinkedIn or whatever, "I'm an expert." Everybody opens up a consultancy. I opened up one too, but after how many years of experience, and even then I was still like, am I doing the right thing? Do I have the credentials? Do I have the expertise? But when you look around, I'm like, holy crap, that guy, that guy just did, he was a supervisor for 4 or 5 years at company A. The other guy, he's a manager in a completely different business for company B. And now they're both doing security consultancy. You just shake your head and you start to realize that, to your point, I put in my time. I don't consider myself an expert, but I damn know what I'm talking about. And that's come with time. So that's not going to be free to anybody who wants our business.
No.
You got to pay for that. Otherwise, go get the kid who's been a supervisor all his life.
And by the way, that's not to say that the younger consultant isn't going to bring value, but you've got to look at the job that you're offering. There's certain things where you need a lot of experience, and there's other things that you may not. But it really is a buyer beware. It's an unregulated space, and really, I think a good consultant is going to give the client things that they need to consider.
And that's the way we're going to end it. I think you summed it up perfectly. Be aware, be careful, do your homework, and find out who it is that you're hiring. Make sure that they're going to be able to meet your needs. So that was good, short and sweet, to the point. I think we covered off the elements that I think are important to a consultant. Any closing comments?
Yeah, just one. A listener and a longtime friend. Big thank you to Javier for your critical comments that were constructive on the post-production quality and the light show that we used to give. So thanks, Jav. I appreciate it.
Yeah, he said some other things, but I can't repeat them on the air because they're very personal. You probably get upset.
Oh, wow. You didn't tell me that part. Hey, Jav, never mind. No thanks.
All right. So that ends episode 31. We'll be on to episode 32 in a couple of weeks. And until then, folks, stay healthy, stay safe, and take care.
Be well, everyone. Take care.
That concludes this podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening and will join us in a couple of weeks for our latest episode. Please remember to like and follow us on our sponsor's webpage, brianclaman.com, where you can leave us your comments and suggest topics you'd like to hear about in future episodes. Until next time, thanks for listening, and don't forget to protect your assets.